Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to this week's edition of Monday Night Live. Tonight, I've got Tracy Hooper all the way from Portland, Oregon. Tracy's a friend of Monday Night Live and has been on the show a number of times. We always learn things from Tracy, and we're looking forward to learning a lot of things today. Tracy's latest book is called The New Hello, and I'm just going to read a little bit of details of Tracy from the back of the book. Tracy's an inspirational professional speaker and founder of the Confidence Project, such an important issue. She's been a TV news reporter, anchor, producer, and voiceover professional. Tracy's real company culture, got all that wrong, but we never worry about that. She'd never do that, or she'd get sacked. Where people are more confident and work together. Tracy coaches executives who want to elevate their professional presence. Welcome again, Tracy. We're so delighted to see you with us. Tonight, we want to talk about words. Words are just so important, words that create energy, words that where we lose energy. Thanks for joining us, and tell us all about the language we use.
All about the language we use. Well, today we're going to talk about positive versus negative language. Derek and I had an interesting conversation to prepare for today. And we talked about how in everyday language we hear people say, "How are you doing? Not too bad," or "Not bad for a Monday," or "I'm hanging in there." What are some other negative words that you've heard, Derek, that get under your skin, that don't encourage positivity?
Don't worry. What really annoys me is that younger people who say, you say thank you, and they go, "That's okay," or "No worries."
Yes.
And I try and give them some coaching on it, but it doesn't work. They think I've gone mad. I'm some old guy who's lost the plot. And of course, don't worry. No worries is what Australians say all the time. I don't know if people say that in the USA.
Yeah, well, we've adopted it from Australia for sure. You hear people say that all the time. What I'm noticing is that there are some hidden negatives inside everyday conversations. For instance, how often do you hear people say, "Let's see if we can't compromise"? Well, what does that mean? Let's see if we can't compromise. That implies that the person you're talking to may be difficult. The clear positive would be, "Let's find a compromise. Let's see if we can compromise on this." Nod your head if you've heard that expression. Let's see if we can. I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but my point is, well, that's assuming that implies that we really don't disagree with someone, but what we're going to say is way more important. I don't disagree, but my point is, it's stronger to say, "I agree with you," and I would add, or "I see what you're saying, and I'll add this." Can you all see the difference? It's subtle, but I think I believe the more positive we can make our language, the more people will compromise with us, the more people will listen to our perspective, will want to have a conversation with us. Here's another one. "You're not wrong. Many countries are on the brink of recession." Who says that? You're not wrong. I mean, that implies that they're not really wrong, but I'm more right than they are. It's stronger to say, "You're right," and I'll add on to that, "I see what you're saying. Here's my perspective." This is subtle, but I've often said this to Derek. Some people wake up in the morning and think of their to-do list. I wake up in the morning and think of words to use and words to lose lists. I'm always adding on to them. And I've noticed these hidden negatives and the opportunity for clear positives. And when you have those clear positives, it gives people a chance it elevates everybody in the room. It lets people know that you honor their point of view. It acknowledges people, and it establishes trust. If someone says, "You're not wrong," I think, well, do they understand what I'm saying? If they're agreeing with me, why don't they simply agree?
I think, Tracy, first of all, they're very negative people. And then when you study neurolinguistics, and we did a couple of sessions, didn't we, on NLP a year or two ago, if you say, "I don't disagree," people, before they have to take the negative off first and then analyze the positive. So it's like saying, don't think of a blue tree. If you say, I don't disagree, they're actually using the word disagree, and you are not wrong. Well, you're wrong, but you're not wrong. So,
Right.
so I know we're playing on words, but these words are very important and can be used in embedded commands. And some of the people on here know all about that, but only a few. Sorry, I interrupted you. I just wanted to come and talk about the negative before the positive.
I appreciate that. I love the idea of you don't want people to think about a blue tree. You say a blue tree, they're going to think about it. It reminds me of, as a parent, you know, it takes 7 positive comments about your child to negate 1 negative one.
Wow.
And that's when you think about how often we correct our children as they're growing up. A woman who I admire said one time, catch your children doing something right. Don't always catch them doing something wrong. Think about that in terms of, I don't disagree. We're making the listener have to work hard to decode what we're saying.
Sure.
If instead we can say, I agree with you, or I understand your point, or I can see where you're coming from, and here's my perspective. I love that. And we've all talked about that. If you say, oh, Derek, I love your shirt, but your hair is kind of sticking out on the side. Well, all you do is think about your hair. Anything after the word but is what we focus on. Therefore, say, and I agree with you, and here's what I'm thinking. It's strong. There you go. Hidden negatives and clear positives.
Now, what about swearing? What about swear words? It seems to be quite macho in 2023. Swear. You hear it more and more on television this side of the Atlantic, and the programs we get from you. I think you call it the F-bomb. Where does the
well, let's talk about it. You all put in the chat box how you refer to this. I refer to these as curse words, foul language, crude, coarse. What do you call? And Derek told me you all call them swear words. I call these weak words. This shows when people use swear words, in my view, it shows that they don't have a strong vocabulary. Think about all the words we can use in the English language, or any language for that matter. And we have to pick a handful of gross, uninspiring words. Have I missed any? Crude, foul, coarse, swear words. Anybody else?
Uncouth, maybe. There's nothing in the chat box yet. You're blowing people away. Okay. So,
well, here's the way I feel.
Bad language. Absolutely right. Yeah,
gutter language. Thank you for that, Carl. Well, here's the article I was referencing before we started recording. It's called "We're Cursing More. Blame the Expletive Pandemic." And it turns out our work-home boundaries are blurred, and we're still Zooming in our yoga pants and gym shorts, and our interactions are more casual, as someone mentioned earlier, and we've let our guard down, and that means we've let our language down too. And this is interesting, you all. We were talking about research. Listen to this, all you in the UK. Denver-based Inversoft Inc. clean speak profanity filtering software, which is used by companies that host online communities and other discussion forums, says the volume of filtered words has more than tripled in the past 18 months. This is an article from 2021. People are becoming more aggressive in their use of profane and sexually explicit terms, says so-and-so. Swearing can activate a natural defense against pain, says Richard Stevens, a psychologist at Keele University in the UK. Do you know this guy, you all? This is what he says. He has studied the effect of emotional language on pain management. His 2009 study found that undergraduates were able to submerge their hands in ice water for 40 seconds longer on average when they uttered a curse word of their choice repeatedly. By arousing part of the nervous system and elevating the heart rate, cursing induced a stimulation, he says, that can have a pain alleviating effect.
I had read that, or something similar to that. Yeah. And I think I might have agreed with it in a way, because I do remember being very stressed several times working for Barclays, and I could watch my own language. I could hear my own language deteriorating at that point, and I felt better for it. I had a good swear, and then I moved on. I don't think
Right. A good
it's
swear in a private place where the whole, the whole community won't hear you.
Yeah.
Here's what people tell me. I swear to get people's attention, or I just want to be myself. And I get that. If you throw the F-bomb, it may get people's attention. I believe it's used so often now that it doesn't have any impact. Or I wanna just be myself. I want to be who I am. Here's the point. We need to know that other people might be offended by the language. And we can't take that chance. I want you to be yourself. I want to be myself. But do we have to be ourselves to the point where we could offend other people? Another thing people say to me, it's not a problem for me because I can code switch. I know when I can cuss in front of my friends, and then when I'm at work, I don't. And I say it's too easy to do. When our girls were younger, I say, if you cuss with your friends, it's going to slip at school. It's going to slip when you're in a tight situation. And don't put yourself in that situation where you have to think about, is this the right place or is this the wrong place to do it? Here's the tenet of the Confidence Project. I believe it's easier to go from professional to casual than from casual to professional. Once people see you or hear how you speak in a certain way, they cannot unhear you that way. They cannot unsee you that way. And therefore, I err on the side of professional, and I don't cuss. I have done it once. I was giving a presentation for a big organization. There was a relevant story where the F-bomb was used. I said to the client, this is part of the story. How do you feel about my using that? And I would say this is a tech company, and therefore there can be more casual atmosphere. And she said, I think it'll be fine. And as soon as I said it in the context of the story, I wanted to put it back in my mouth. I was embarrassed for myself. And I have never done it since.
It's very interesting. I've done the same as well. Once I realized you should never, ever do it in front of an audience. But I was always curious that Richard Bandler, the inventor of NLP, does it all the time. And he does it for effect, or maybe for a pattern interrupt in psychology. But actually it's overused and it's quite offensive, and it devalues it. And then people copy him, don't they? Because you become who you spend the most time with.
Absolutely. We talk about what influences our language. The first piece that influences our language is habit. We speak a certain way. We don't get feedback about it. We continue to speak that way. It's comfortable. The second influence on our word choice is culture. The family culture we were born into. If we heard our parents, our elders use certain phrases, we tend to use those too, because we want to fit in. We want to belong. What's more important than belonging? But the other part of culture is popular culture. The cars we drive, the clothes we wear, the social media we ingest, the music we listen to, the language that we use is all a part of popular culture. If we hear it, we say it because we want to fit in. Subconsciously, if I say this, I'll seem cool. If I say this, I'll seem relevant. If I say this, I'll fit in. And we slip into it, and we don't realize that if you really want to stand out, if you really want to be the best version of yourself, to overuse an expression, don't cuss. People will notice it. You can make an impact by pausing rather than cussing.
The power pause is a very interesting thing to do, isn't it? Something I don't think I've really mastered, or perhaps I do it intuitively. I don't know. What's your view on the power pause?
Oh, I think it's everything. Not everything. I think it's key. By that, I mean, it gives people it gives you a chance to gather your thoughts. And it also gives the listener a chance to process what you've just said, or get ready for something you're going to say. We always think about a comedian. Before they deliver a punchline, they pause. We can't wait to hear what they're going to say. Therefore, if you are if you have those words in your vocabulary that are fillers, like, sort of, kind of, those are hedges. If you use those kinds of words, then you can hold yourself back right before you say it and then pause and say what you're going to say. I'm a pretty good presenter versus I'm a good presenter. Pretty is one of those words I love to remind people of. How often do we say, I'm pretty good at negotiating. I'm pretty skilled at taking a complicated situation and simplifying it. I'm pretty prolific. I'm a pretty prolific writer. What does that mean? A pretty prolific writer. Either you are or you aren't.
Absolutely.
Take out that word pretty. That's a hedge that I'm digressing here, Derek, but
No,
that's
no,
the
no.
power pause.
That's great. I tell you what, put in the chat box if 10 is fantastic, on a scale of 0 to 10, if someone devalues the word good by pretty, what does that make the statement on a scale of 0 to 10 in your opinion? In the meantime, we'll keep going. Nancy. If Tracy, goodness me, what's the matter? I'm losing the plot here.
That's fine. My sister-in-law is Nancy. I take that as a high.
Well, that's why I said it.
Or maybe it's Nancy Lotz Taylor you're thinking about.
Let's move on to chapter 6, or is it chapter 7 in your book, where you actually talk about words to lose and words to use. I know you've mentioned some of them, but can we pick up a few more?
Yeah, I would love to talk about validators.
Oh yeah, validators, fillers, and hedges you talked about, didn't you?
Well, hedges are words that we use because we don't want to come on too strong. We don't want to seem like we're aggressive.
Right.
Heaven forbid assertive. We use words like just. I just have a quick question. I'm just circling back. That's code for I'm circling back to see if you got my email that I sent you 2 weeks ago, and I wish you would please respond to me. Take out that word just. I'm circling back to ask you. I'm wondering about. We don't need to justify what we're saying. But here's another hedge that I think is really important that we don't often think about, and that is lucky. I was lucky to get this job. I was lucky to book this client. I was lucky to get the interview with, or the conversation with Damian Lewis. I was lucky to be, luck, as Seth Godin says, luck is not a strategy. Luck is finding a parking spot, a sweet parking spot when you're in a hurry. Luck is going to the grocery store and everything you need is on sale. Luck is winning the lottery. You're not lucky. You have, no matter what your profession, worked hard to get where you are, make those relationships, continue to grow. That's not luck. That's a hedge I want people to lose.
Couple of things there. 4 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 7. Call that an average of 6. Alex says it's context sensitive. Of course it is, but pretty devalues good. That's why I asked the question. So if good was a 7, it seems to have devalued it. Luck defined as when preparation meets opportunity. All the time, you won't be lucky unless you prepare or labor under correct knowledge. I came across that a number of years ago and always remembered it. Fantastic.
Spot on.
I stopped you in flow. Sorry.
Let's talk about validators. I love validators because validators are words that we use because we want to make sure people are following along, that they're getting what we're saying. Therefore, we say things like, phrases like, I don't like to use word things. Patricia Fripp would get me for that. What is that thing? They use phrases like, is that okay? Do you know what I mean? Am I being clear? Does that make sense? Do you see what I'm saying? How often do you hear that? And look at my body language. Does that make sense? Am I being clear? And that is a validator. We want people to follow along. We want to make sure they're getting it. But the words to use are, instead of saying, does that make sense? You can say, do you have any questions? And somebody talked about context. Of course, context is key. I was giving a presentation at a large law firm here in Portland. And one of the senior partners said to me, look, we're in family law. We talk about divorce, alimony, child support, bank accounts, real estate. It's complicated. and it's emotional. I will say to my clients, does that make sense? Or am I being clear? Absolutely. There are times when you can say that. But when you're giving a presentation or you're making some kind of a pitch or you're having a conversation with someone, to always say, does that make sense? Doesn't sound strong. It's easier to say, do you have any questions? Is there anything I can clarify for you? What are your thoughts? Stronger than asking people if what you're saying isn't clear.
Mm.
I love those validators.
Out of context, does that make sense? Devalues it, what you're doing and what you're saying. I think in a negotiation, I might ask it if I was getting this sort of body language and I wanted to clarify whether they'd got it or not.
Right. Or you could say, raise your hand if this resonates with you.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Does anybody want to add some insight? Sure. Then you get people involved. Mm. Can you read from the chat box, Derek?
I can, yes, of course I can. There's a few things in the chat box, but I'll try and cut some of them down and we'll talk about them. Alan said he learned to use positive language from his kids from their birth from a book by Dennis Waitley. I followed Dennis Waitley and Brian Tracy very much in the early days of audio tapes. Most people are too young to remember audio tapes, but I've still got some here, which is absolutely right. Positive language. And not Dennis, Harvey McKay says, I'll never talk to anyone that's negative. And I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's right in a way, because they drain your energy. That's the issue. As we said at the beginning, there's people that fire up your energy and there's people that drain your energy. And we can all picture someone now, I guess, who drains their energy. Okay.
Derek, how about this? May I offer what I think is the $1 million phrase?
Yes, please. We're all writing it down now.
That's right. As they do in public speaking, write this down, everybody. And it starts with a story. When I was moving along in my TV news career, my husband Henry was applying to graduate school, and he applied to schools in markets that were good for me. And then where he got accepted, I started applying for jobs. And I applied for a job at WFSB in Hartford, Connecticut. And I went to see the news director, and he said to me, I really like your tape. I had to go there physically back in the day, and I took my demo tape with me. And he said, I really like your tape, but we don't have any openings. And I said, thank you very much. And I came back home. And I was working with an agent at the time. His name is Ron Shapiro. And he has been a longtime sports agent for Baseball Hall of Famers and Football Hall of Famers. And he took me on as a cub reporter. And I said to him, Ron, they liked my tape, but they don't have an opening. And I thought he would say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. And he said, okay, Tracy, I want you to go back to that news director and tell him, I'm impressed with your team. I love the information, the news that you're putting on the air. And here's the quote, and I don't want to miss the chance of working for you. What if I work half time in the newsroom as a producer and half time on the street as a reporter? And I thought, yikes, can I say that? So I practiced my pitch, which I tell everybody do. We got to practice. You can't show up and wing it ever. I practiced my pitch. I called him on the phone and I said that, Dick, I'm impressed with what you're doing. Your team is fantastic. I don't want to miss the chance of working for you. What if I do this and that? And he said, wow, nobody's ever offered us that before. I'll get back with you. 2 weeks later, he calls me back. He said, when can you start? And I thought, wow, I'm going to shout that from the rooftop, share this with everybody I know. I don't want to miss the chance to interview you, talk to you, hire you, promote you, mentor you, meet you, invite you to, congratulate you. I didn't want to miss the chance to congratulate you on your promotion, on the publishing of the new article in Time Magazine or whatever. I don't want to miss the chance. And the beauty of this line, this $1 million phrase, is it not only elevates them, but it also elevates you. Like you want to be able to share them with other people, introduce them to people, work for them, hire them. I love it. I'm now sharing it across the pond, and I'm thrilled to do that.
The
What are
camera,
your thoughts about
the
that?
camera, please repeat it again.
I don't want to miss the chance. I don't want to miss the chance to talk with you, interview you, hire you, congratulate you, personally invite you to. I don't want to miss the chance.
Fabulous. Now, in the last few minutes of the program, I want to turn to when you were a news anchor. The thing that makes me cross over here is the negative news. It seems to me that a lot of news programs want to open with the power of three, and every one of those three has to be an emotional situation, which makes me feel negative. But it seems to play on minds. Why is that? Why can't the news programs start with a positive message?
Because as we say in the news business, then and now, if it bleeds, it leads. People are attracted to the negative. They want to know what bad is going on. I remember in when I was a reporter, we used to do something. If there wasn't any news going on, we would cruise for news. We would get in the news vehicle, the photographer, videographer, and I, and drive around town looking for news. Now, you don't have to do that anymore because social media lets you know in real time everything that's happening in the world. But, and you know, it's interesting because I thought I wanted to be a hard news reporter. I thought I want to have the lead story every night. And I would get it occasionally if I were covering a trial. They would lead with me. I'd be outside of the courtroom. But for the most part, you all, I did human interest stories because that's who I am. I'm a positive person. I'm good at encouraging people to talk about themselves or something that's going on in their world. And I remember having a conversation with myself. You are who you are. Let other people do the hard news. You can do it, but it's not your sweet spot. And I often had the story at the end of the newscast, which I hope people hung around long enough to hear. But that's what suited me. I encourage you to. This is what I do. We get the Sunday New York Times, and I read the front section, of course. I read the business section or the opinion section. And then I give myself a break. Then I go to the section where they're talking about arts and entertainment, where I can find out what interesting plays or movies or lectures or books have been written. Give yourself that break in between all the hard news that we need to know. We need to know about the economy, and we need to know about the war in Ukraine, and we need to know about homelessness or unemployment, but not 24/7. Give yourself a break in between all that hard news and give yourself something to celebrate.
Now, Tracy, we talk about body language and you talk about nasty resting face in your book. And I've just put everybody on gallery view to see how many nasty resting faces we've got. We don't have any, I think. We've got a lot of people smiling. I don't know whether that was because of what I said, but what do you mean by nasty resting face? And I have heard it referred to as something else as well, this side of the pond, but I'm not going to mention it.
That's right. It has an acronym. We'll avoid that. It's funny you should say that, Derek, because I have magazines. Well, here's a picture of the Wall Street Journal. You recognize this guy, Stephen Colbert?
I don't, but everybody else will, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's a late night talk show guy. He doesn't really have a nasty resting face here, but he has kind of a non-committal, distant, I would say vaguely interested expression on his face. And that is a part of our popular culture. Look at magazines, look at billboards, watch any kind of commercial on television, and you'll find people who have this distant kind of like look on their face. I refer to that as a nasty resting face. It means I'm too cool. I'm trying to act like everybody else. And I think there's nothing better than a pleasant resting face, which is slightly upturned cheeks, right? You have a slight smile. It's not a big smile. You have engaged eyes. You use your eyebrows. When you raise your eyebrows and you lean in, that lets people know that you're interested. I'm following along. I'm curious about what you have to say, versus this cold, distant, nasty resting face. And it's very apparent on Zoom because people are sitting there listening or not. And as a speaker, you get a lot of energy from other people in the room. Tim Durkin is nodding his head. He's smiling at me. I appreciate that. We need to do that for every Zoom call we're on, because it's hard enough to be a speaker, and then you have to be an expert about some subject. You want people to follow along and feel like you're getting feedback. So avoid that nasty resting face. Use your eyebrows, open up your eyes, lean in, a slight smile. A pleasant resting face will go a long way.
While you're on that subject, how some people just have the knack of, when they're on television, of looking like they're in your front room. Not many people, most people kind of are a bit like that, but they're reading an auto cue. How do you do that?
Well, the secret for that is to look into the lens. I want you to watch this, and I'm going to look down at you all. Now, Carl's nodding his head, and Cheryl just turned this way, and Nancy's smiling. I can see you all, but does it look like I'm looking at you, Godfrey? Does it look like I'm looking at you? No, I'm looking at the screen. Now, does it feel like I'm looking at you? Can you see the difference? I'm looking down at the screen. Douglas is taking notes, and now I'm going to look up at the camera. This is a technique. I remember as a news reporter, I said to Pete Greer, one of my idol, whenever the assignment editor said, Tracy, you and Pete are working together today, I thought, oh, it's going to be a great day, because he was such a good videographer. And I said to him once, we were doing a stand-up, where you stand there in front of wherever you are with the microphone. And I said, Pete, I feel like I'm looking into a dark hole when I look into the lens. He said, Tracy, picture someone you know, love, or respect on the other side of that camera and speak to that person. That makes it feel like they are the most important person in the room, as if you are having a conversation with them. And I thought, well, I love my mom. I'll talk to my mom. And from then on, when I looked into the camera, I told the news story of the day to her. And now I can glance down and see that Lorraine has a pleasant resting face, but then I glance back up at the camera. So you can look away periodically. You can look at people to see if they're paying attention, but then always go back to that camera of yours. That will really help you to connect.
Before we come to your last bonus tip, before we finish it, there's a couple of quotes in the chat box, which I must mention. Carl says, your vibe attracts your tribe. I've never heard of that one. Thank you, Carl. I'll be using that shortly. And Andrew Plumage says, on the news, the maxim in news is, if you're not scared, you're not doing your job properly as the reporter. I think that's a bit strong, but I think Andrew's probably right. I don't know.
Well, I was always scared if I had to have a live newscast. I just thought, if I'm going to be the lead story and it's got to be live, I was scared. And it didn't matter how well prepared I was, or how many good sound bites I had, or how strong the story was. When it's live, it's nerve-wracking. So I'm with you, and I'm with you there, Andrew.
So the bonus tip, Tracy, before we come to the end of the show, for us all for 2023, although we'll get you back towards the end of 2023. You won't escape from us.
Thank you. It'd be my great pleasure. My bonus tip is this. I want you to consider, speaking of words to lose and use, I want you to consider switching from saying, I'm sorry, to thank you. Instead of saying, sorry for asking this question, sorry, I have a different opinion, sorry, I disagree. All the times that we say, I'm sorry, that we don't need to, we can switch to thank you. Thank you for your patience. Instead of saying at the beginning of an email, sorry to take so long getting back to you. Thank you for your patience. I wanted to do the research before I responded to your email. Sorry for the noise. It's my neighbor's leaf blower. Instead, say, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your flexibility with my Wi-Fi. There's so many different ways that we can say thank you. I appreciate your understanding, as opposed to apologizing. That would be my tip for 23.
Absolutely brilliant. Now in London or some parts, some cities in the around the world, if you bump into someone or move out the way, you generally say sorry in case he's got a shotgun or bigger than you. So I've noticed that since we talked before, that I say sorry to people when I probably don't need to, but it's self-preservation, I think.
Well, it could be, or you could say good morning. You could say good morning. If two people headed for the same, if you're headed to the same door with somebody, instead of saying, oh, sorry, you could say, after you. If you're going into a crowded elevator, instead of saying, oh, sorry, you go first, sorry, you could say, I have a meeting that starts in 5 minutes. Would you mind if I went ahead of you? Thanks very much. All kinds of ways that we can, is the word deprogram ourselves, unprogram ourselves to stop using certain words. And I will leave you with this too, Derek, and everybody. Be kind to yourself. Psychologists tell us it takes 30 days to build a habit or to break one. Therefore, if you want to lose the word sorry habitually, of course, if you've made a mistake, if there's been a misunderstanding, absolutely apologize. If you want to express empathy, I'm sorry this is happening for you. What can I do to help you? That's a perfectly appropriate way to use I'm sorry. But if you want to break the habitual way of, if somebody bumps into you and you apologize and you'll say thank you instead, give yourself 30 days to do that. Then you can move on to the next word or phrase.
That's absolutely fantastic, Tracy. Thanks very much. How do people get hold of this book? Is it available on Amazon in the UK?
It is available on Amazon in the UK, and I also have the audio version, which is now available. I figured as a voiceover person, I should voice my own book. So here it is. And this is the way I encourage you all to read it. Look at the table of contents, pick a chapter that sparks your interest and read that chapter. You don't have to read it from beginning to end. Of course, every author would love that. But do what works for you. If you're interested in words to use and lose, that's chapters 6 and 7. If you're interested in confident conversations, that's chapter, I don't know, maybe 10. I can't remember.
You'll find it.
But pick a chapter that interests you.
Tracy, thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to ask members of Monday Night Live to give you the usual round of applause in the normal way, please.
Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you.